Okay, so chapters 11 and 12, women and minorities. Oh, what's going on now? There we go. So let's start with a history of women's prisons. We haven't always had women's prisons. In fact, they're kind of a new thing. For the most part, really until about the last 100, 150 years, women have always been held in parts of men's facilities. And women have always been an afterthought in corrections because, well, frankly, there just aren't a lot of women criminals. So for the very few there were, well, we just held them in parts of men's facilities. Now, hopefully you can see the problem here. They were often sexually abused by both guards and male inmates. In fact, a lot of times, if male inmates, did something that they were supposed to do, for example, if they were on a work detail and they completed their work detail very well, they would be rewarded by being able to spend time with females. So you must imagine that there were quite a number of prison babies. So this was a pretty ugly chapter in women's corrections. Now, if you're looking for somebody to put on your list of heroes, this is a good one. Right, Elizabeth Fry. Now, she was over in England, and this was in about the mid-1800s, but we ripped off some ideas from her, which is okay to do. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And she was an advocate for female prison reform in England. And what she said was that prisoners should be segregated by sex. You needed to have male prisoners over here and female prisoners over here, far, far away from, her words, the corrupting influences of males. And that only women guards should supervise women prisoners to prevent abuse. So we sort of ripped that off from her. We took our sweet time about it because we didn't rip it off from her for about another 50 years. But the idea was there. Seeds were sown. When we started building women's prisons in the United States, we did so in what came to be called the cottage-style architecture. It was a radical departure from the way that we were building men's prisons, which were, of course, all bricks and mortar and bars and very grim-looking places. Women's prisons, instead, were these bright cottage-style, very home-like settings. So what we would see for women's prisons were several smaller housing units. Instead of these great big monolithic cell blocks, we would see several smaller housing units like this. And they were all self-contained. There wasn't a chow hall because each of these housing units would have its own dining area. It had its own kitchen. The female inmates would prepare their own meals. They would set the dining table. They had tablecloths. They had glass dinnerware. They had silverware, which was kept polished. And their cells were more like rooms than cells. And it was a very home-like environment. This was in keeping with the philosophy of women's corrections at the time. Now, please, females, do not throw anything at me. I'm just telling the story how it is, okay? This was the philosophy of teaching women proper homemaking skills. Because you see, if you go back to Freudian psychology, do we all know Sigmund Freud from psychology class? So Freud said a lot of things. One of the things that Freud said was that the reason females commit crime, they don't very often, but when women commit crime, it's because they suffer from penis envy. That is, they really desire to be males. So they behave like males and commit crime. So, the philosophy goes, the best way to rehabilitate a female is to put her in a home-like setting, to teach her proper homemaking skills, so that when she is released, she will understand her proper place in society and marry and have children and be a good little housewife. That is why women's prisons were built like this. This lasted pretty much until about the 1950s or so. Nowadays, women's prisons resemble male facilities. They're all pretty much the same thing. I did have the opportunity to see one of the old cottage-style facilities in Michigan before we tore it down, or did something with it, I'm not sure what. It was called Florence Crane Correctional Facility, and it was way down in Coldwater, almost to the Indiana border. And when we drove up on that, we were dropping somebody off, picking somebody up, I don't remember, on a transport. We drove up to it, and honest to God, we thought we were in the wrong place. We couldn't tell that we were on prison grounds except for there were a few signs here and there. There was no fence, there was no barbed wire, there was no nothing. There's just this big open expanse of grass and a long winding road up to the top of a hill, and a place that did not look very much like a prison at the top of the hill. So we were very confused, and we see a female inmate tending the yard, raking or mowing the lawn or something, I don't remember. So we literally pulled our squad car over and flagged her over. Said, hey, can you direct us to the women's prison? Oh, you're right on the way, that's right there, you can see it. Really? Yeah, that one is no longer in use. I don't know if they tore it down or repurposed it or what they did. But they've consolidated all of the women into one location now, and that's right here. So we have one female prison, Women's Huron Valley, and it's down by Ypsilanti, down in Washtenaw County. And they have pretty much levels 1, 2, and 4, and then of course they've got a segregation unit for the troublemakers. So I don't think that they actually have a formal level 5 maximum security, but if somebody starts acting out, then they just put them in segregation, which is pretty much maximum security.